Hello, everyone. I'm Troy, alongside Sean and Lester, and this is Tough Talk, the Uncomfortable Podcast, a podcast where we explore and dissect some of the deepest and nuanced topics within our society to hopefully formulate ideas that will ignite positive change in us, the podcasters, and you, the listening audience.
And we are going to be discussing the midterms, the 2022 midterms, an interesting happenstance. I like to begin the show by discussing some important statistics. I'm just going to jump right into that. So the largest demographic of voters in the 2022 midterms were ages 18 to 44 voted Democratic by 52%, while 43% voted of the same age group for Republicans. White men voted 61% overwhelmingly for Republicans. White women voted 56% overwhelmingly for Republicans. On the other side, Black men voted 78% overwhelmingly Democrat. Black women voted 87% Democratic. Latino men voted 51% Democrat. Latino women voted 61% Democrat, and all others voted pretty much 52% Democrat. 51% of adults disapproved of the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. 40% described the current state of the economy as poor. Only 21% of adults approve of the way Congress is handling its job. The most important issue for Republicans is inflation and the price of everything. The most important issue for Democrats is healthcare. Some of the top issues for voters in general were the economy by 26%, abortion by 25%, healthcare by 16%, immigration by 14%, gun control by 9%, and lastly, taxes by 8%. Americans' support for the canceling $10,000 of federal student loan debt is as follows. 34% strongly support that measure. 17% somewhat supports it, while on the other side, 11% somewhat opposes it. 29% strongly opposes it, and 9% are just not sure. These analytics and exit poll numbers can be referenced at statistic.com. And without further ado, gentlemen, anybody could jump in. We're going to start off our show.
Yeah, that's some powerful statistics. I was also looking at specifically to Georgia. Georgia had some record-breaking turnout when it came to voting, especially early voting. I mean, it was the highest that Georgia has ever seen. And reading from the government website, the Georgia government website, they were talking about the high turnout. And it was like, on November 1st, they had about 1.6, a little over 1.6 million voters cast their ballots early, which is huge. In 2018, they had about 1.1 million. So you could see the rise in the amount of people that went out and casted their ballot early. And this is on both sides, the Republican and Democratic side. There was also a good turnout for the Libertarian candidate as well, which is something that Georgia hasn't seen before neither. So, a lot of people believe the Libertarian candidate played a huge role in this, us going into a runoff, which, is something, again, usually doesn't always happen, where a Libertarian candidate is being able to throw somewhat of a wrench into the whole voting apparatus here, right? So it's this voting season has been quite unique. To use a word, I think it's been very unique. The candidates that have been running has been pretty unique, especially from my point of view, from the Republican side. But I think this midterm generally showed, like you said, Sean, a lot of people were not very, even though it did look, based on I always tell people, based on the Supreme Court decision, you would think people backed the Supreme Court, removing it from the federal hands or moving from the courts and bringing it back down to the states. Yeah, the Roe versus Wade, and putting it back in the hands of the state. You can see a lot of people, based on their voting habit, did have issues with that, even though it was not extremely vocal. You really thought it was one group or one side really felt a certain way and another group felt a certain way. And, based on the turnout and what you have seen across the nation, it definitely speaks volumes.
I think you're right. I think the whole Roe versus Wade decision by the Supreme Court definitely affected the midterms in general. Of course, generally during a midterm, the opposite party normally takes a lot of seats. They normally win and pick up a lot of seats in the House of Representatives and maybe a few in the Senate. This was something very different that we haven't seen in many, many years. Democrats, if they win the runoff in Georgia, will actually pick up one seat. But it virtually stayed the same. The Republicans was expecting to pick up at least 20, not 20 something to 30 something seats. That was the expectation. They did pick up a few seats. They did win the House of Representatives. But this was not any red wave by any, any notion at all. And so I think the court decision definitely had a lot to do with people coming out, turning out, a lot of the independents who are on the borderline about who they're going to vote for. I think that was, because even Republicans see this decision as going slightly too far, and so I think that had a lot to do with people turning out. I also think, in addition to that, I think, of course, and many Republicans are saying that now, that the candidate quality really was very, very poor. And I think people saw through a lot of that. There are still a lot of Trumpers. There's still a lot of people who are MAGA supporters. There are still a lot of people who are election deniers. No question about that. But I think I think people kind of saw through it and didn't want the all of the division in the election deniers and this sort of thing. I think people kind of saw through that. So so Democrats didn't do as bad as they could have done.
It definitely defied everyone's expectations. I know it did mine. Listen, to be quite frank, we dodged a bullet with the words crazy and chaotic written across it. I think the 1-6 committee had a lot to do with at least shaping viewers' opinions about the January 6th, I call it sedition and riot situation. And I think that those televised hearings were extremely important. I think that they were clear and successful and putting a clear choice before the voters just before the midterms.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys on that. I do think, though, there's certain strongholds in certain states, right? So like Georgia is one of them where, you see that Kemp was able to win very easily. Walker wasn't. And that's where I was saying the Libertarian played a huge role. If you look at the numbers, the Libertarian was able to command between Warnock and Walker. It's pretty good what he was able to do. But also was it Marjorie Taylor Greene? She won. And you can still see where the stronghold or a belief system is still permanent in many ways, right? Like there's definitely a possibility that Herschel Walker could win in the runoff, right? It's not like, it's not a cakewalk for Warnock, which I think initially everybody thought it was going to be. You can see that even with all the negativity that surrounds Herschel Walker, he is still able to command a lot of votes. And I do think the Republican Party are long-term strategist thinkers, like compared to the Democratic Party. I do think the Republican Party looks extremely long-term, and you can actually see it with the Supreme Court, right? As the Democrats won elections, they didn't strategically position themselves to be able to protect certain rights, like they did not. But the Republicans were slowly chipping away at doing that, right? Every opportunity they got, while people were focused on national voting, they were focusing on local voting opportunities, local positions, where they were able to change mapping and zoning and all those type things they were able to work in. And you actually see how that played out, and how it's playing out and how it will play out, because they've been able to win on those levels where it's very important when it comes to voting, right? So I was reading an article the other day where they're talking about, when you look at it from a national scale, we have a Democratic president, but then when you start going deeper into the states, you see that a lot of these places are Republican controlled.
Mm-hmm.
So they're definitely on the level, the small, we would say smaller level, but the most important levels, right? The levels where they are putting forth policy that actually affects people's lives every day, right? This, what the state is able to do around abortion, the federal government can't do anything about it, right? Mm-hmm. So you start to see like their strategy, and hopefully, Democrats and independents, or whoever, libertarians, they take a page out of that book and try to figure out a way to strengthen their power a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same story in Florida where I am. Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis, they cleaned the Democrats' clock, and which is really weird to me, because I watched both debates with those gentlemen and the Democratic opponents, and I still don't see how deer in headlights and just weird answers or indirect answers from those two candidates, somehow they still prevailed. Florida is a very different state, and it's got this sort of caveat with the Cuban Hispanic population, and this whole fear of communism. And the Republicans really worked that narrative with that voter demographic, and they turned out in support of DeSantis and Rubio. And so it's a little bit more complicated than Georgia, but it's the same set of sizable challenges here. Democrats have to try a different technique here to win back votership within the Cuban and Hispanic population.
And I think that's the difficult part even for Abrams running here in Georgia, right, is she had to reach out to these rural areas. And if you look at the map of where she got the most votes, it was all in the metropolitan areas. I mean, she picked up some votes in Savannah and some rural areas that had a pretty significant amount of a Black population. But for the major part of her voting came from all the metropolitan areas. I think she even won Cobb. Like she won areas that, on the north side of the city, you wouldn't think she would have won a few years back. She didn't win a few years back. So she won it this time around. And it either shows, one, that mindsets changed, or that demographics have shifted in those areas, right? So that's something I haven't looked into. I know Gwinnett County, for instance, and I think I need to look this back up, so don't quote me on this. I'm gonna look it up as we talk just to make sure I'm right. But I think she actually won Gwinnett County too, and which is big, right? Because then that shows a massive shift, either in mindset or demographic, right? So, I think that's one of the things the Democrats need to focus on if they're looking to win places like Georgia, is getting out more to those rural areas where Caucasians are, and figuring out a way to showcase what policies they can enact that would help those individuals out. And maybe not. Maybe they see, maybe they won't. But I think a lot of times we play this, you go after the people that you will vote for you instead of some of those that people that may not vote for you. And I think that's a little dangerous. I think Kemp did something smart when he went to, the Black churches and spoke there. That was a smart move on his part. So I think Democrats need to put themselves in those arenas as well, where they're talking to people who are not truly their voter base at all.
Well, every politician goes to the church. It's a Black church, man.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think Stacey Abrams did the same thing. Even came to our church. But yeah, I think it's hard to really, like you said, Troy, it's hard to really pinpoint why she didn't do as well as she did the last time. But one big factor too, you're up against an incumbent governor.
Yeah,
always
Kemp didn't do such a bad job. Kemp didn't do such a bad job.
Yeah, he did pretty good. But of course, looking in Florida, DeSantis just kind of ran away with the whole thing, and did pretty good, and had a lot of some of the other electorates down there, won by wide margins as well. So that's going to be a model for Republicans coming up, in the 2024 elections, presidential elections, and then midterms, from there on. I think Stacey Abrams has an appeal, but there's been some controversy about, and this goes back about men voting for women. And that sounds kind of, getting into something else, but and there was some awesome controversy about Black men. I think that was kind of a made up controversy to me. To me, I think that that was just not the case. I know she had some, it's out there that she had some issues with some Black male voters. But I think and she made a statement that I think kind of hurt her with some male voters. She basically said something to the effect that Black males are being targeted for disinformation. And so a lot of Black males got turned off. I thought that was not a good comment because, I think not just Black men, I think Black people in general are targeted for misinformation. So, when you single out a group like that, it's not always good. But I think she's a very smart woman. She has a strong future ahead of her still. But Democrats need to go back to the drawing board. Like I agree with you, Troy. We need to get Democrats need to be very, very smart about going into some of the rural areas, and that has always been a key factor. That was pretty much why Trump won. He got a lot of these rural areas that people didn't go. People raising money to try to get these big swaths, these cities. But if you don't go out to the rural areas, you miss a lot of the vote, a lot of the electorate. And I think the Democrats have got to get that under control, and they've had problems with that for some reason. For a number of years. But I think moving forward, I think we into, if you look at what's going on, if you look at the House of Representatives, it looks like we're going to be in for a lot of hearings and whatnot, specifically Hunter Biden. And it almost seems like we're not going to be getting nothing done. Hunter Biden is not really elected official. It's almost a payback for losing the 2020 general election. And I think this is what they're talking about, one of their top agendas is to hold hearings and possibly impeachment for even the DOJ, head of the DOJ. And so, and said nothing about health care and some of the other things that they promised that they would do. So I think we're in for a mess coming up right now when it comes to the House of Representatives.
I had a question that I posed in social media. Why does it take 218 newly elected Republicans to investigate one person for 2 years? And why is that even acceptable within the minds of Republican voters is absolutely ridiculous.
Right, right. This is completely, I mean, I know you're getting off, but this is, to me, just completely, it's just like, it's almost like playing kid games to me. It's just literally, I'm getting back at you because you did this to Trump, you did this to Republicans, so now it's time for us to get back to you. We're going to investigate your son. It's so clear, and, it's not going to help them. You saw what just happened in the midterms. And historically, even with going back to Bill Clinton, it did not help the other party. It wound up strengthening Bill Clinton back in the 90s when he was with Whitewater. And even when Trump, it wound up strengthening him. So, we got to look at this and look at the tea leaves and see that this is not going to necessarily work, especially when you're dealing with something as petty as Hunter Biden, who is his son, who was never really elected official, didn't hold a cabinet position, maybe did some things that were a little maybe weird, but I just think it's a waste of time, and it just shows you what the Republicans are really all about. And unfortunately, to me, and I'm just in my opinion, like I said, once again, this is opinions, a show of opinions. They're really wasting their time, and they with this particular issue. And I think they're doing the country a misservice by focusing on this rather than focusing on some of the issues like healthcare and
the hard part is demographic shift and change and drawing these lines where it's playing that game, right? Of basically setting up the pieces on the board so you can win. And I think the Republicans have done a great job of that. If you look at the breakdown of Georgia, where Kemp won and where Stacey Abrams won, she did win Gwinnett. She won some major counties that had a massive shift in demographics. She won Fulton County, plus 38. She won Cobb. She won Gwinnett. She won DeKalb. She won Chatham. She won Henry County, Clayton, Richmond. And if you start like breaking down some of these places, right?
Mm-hmm.
Start to look at the populations that she won, like the areas that have the highest populations, are some of the ones where she has won, right? And then you start looking deeper into that. You start looking at the diversity of these areas.
Right.
You start to understand, all right, this is where she's winning.
Right.
I think like a place like where I live, Fayette County, Kemp won that.
Right.
But he didn't win that by an extremely large margin, but he won it. But you can see the demographic shift that's happening in Fayette. So I do think as demographics shift, I think there's always an opportunity, not just for Democrats, the two-party system that we have, but even the libertarians, right? Like they're slowly but surely making a dent. And I do think at least the race between Walker and Warnock, that libertarian played a role in that, in this going into a runoff, right? He siphoned some of those votes, So, I think even libertarians, you was talking about social media, Sean. I'm in a group where there's a lot of libertarians, and a lot of times they lean somewhat closely to the right, to the Republican side. But I think even they are shifting in some aspects to pick up voters that are very close to the middle. So like people like me who've been registered independent for like years, I think these libertarians are like aiming towards those groups of people as well, right? Trying to pick up votes there. They're still trying to become a party that is serious, a serious party that can actually, get some votes. And like I said, I think with the Warnock and Walker situation, you saw that. Either people maybe have voted just for that guy because they didn't want to vote for the two that were there. That could be it too.
Let me ask you something, right? What's the thinking of the average libertarian that compels them to go either Republican or Democrat or, vote Libertarian. Like, it sounds like libertarians more than any of us, Troy. So what's your opinion on how they think? What are they looking for?
From what I have learned, their biggest issue is government being out of everything, right? Their biggest thing is government not being involved in anything. Allowing people to live the way they want to live, freedom of everything. So freedom of speech and every bit of that freedom of speech, meaning like if you don't want if you don't want to bake a cake for a gay person, then you should have that right to not bake a cake for that gay person. If you don't want to serve a Black person in your restaurant, then you should have that right to not want to serve a Black person in your restaurant. Their view is if someone is racist, then you call them out for it and you protest and you do all the things that you can do under the law to disturb that business so they don't get any customers. But you should have the right to do what you want to do, freedom of speech. So they're all about the freedoms that are enacted in our Constitution, right? From what I've learned from a lot of libertarians, they're not war hungry. So they're against a lot of times unnecessary wars. They skew both like when it comes to certain things where, when you look at Republicans, you see them as a group who are like anti-LGBTQ, but libertarians are not that. Even they may have economic values of a Republican, as in like, they may be against certain welfare situations or like I said, they want government out of certain situations, especially the federal government. They don't want the federal government in certain things, right? So that way they lean kind of Republican, but then from a social aspect, they're against like protecting the police with giving the police immunity in certain situations and things like that, like they have currently, right? So they have pieces from both sides, but the biggest thing is the freedom, right? The freedom of you being able to do what you want to do is their biggest push.
A laissez-faire system. When they don't, they want is less government intervention into their lives.
Yes. So they're not for like breaking the law, but if you are a person that said something racist, they don't think like the government should get involved in forcing you to like I said, if you didn't want to serve Black people at your restaurant, they're not of the feeling that the government should get involved and make you serve somebody that you don't want to serve, so like, and I always get in conversation with them, like when it comes to businesses and hiring and things of that nature. Then what, so like the people I have gotten conversations from, they look at it from an aspect of that. Well, I don't want to be forced to serve somebody that I don't want to serve. Well, what about hiring somebody? If you're the only business on the block, then, so I always hit them with that. Like, this is why certain things need the government involved, right? Because there's certain people. And again, a lot of libertarians, to be honest, and I can look this up, but the ones I know, and I've yet to meet a high melanated African American libertarian. I've never met one. So I think a lot of times it's our Caucasian brothers and sisters who have they have a way of life that people like us don't always have the liberty to have, right? There's certain things they're able to float through the world and not have to confront certain aspects of the world that we have to confront. There's certain discrimination they would never ever have to face. So it's easy for them to say, and I've told people, some of the libertarian people I know, it's easy for you to say that, a business should be able to do this and no one should force them. It's easy for you because you would still always be accepted in that racist business. Right. Like you would not have to worry about it. You can still go there and eat. Right. But if that business is the only business in town, and I need a job, you're asking me to go miles away because this business doesn't want to hire me because of the color of my skin. No, there needs to be something done about that, right? So like, there's that conversation as well. But I think that is starting to change with some libertarians as they're still trying to, build their party, and actually to get votes, they need to be as diverse as ever.
Right.
And so I think a lot of them are also changing their tune when it comes to certain things as well.
What do y'all, not to get off the subject, but what do y'all think about the what message does this past midterm actually send to not only the Republican Party, but what message does it send to the nation as a whole? What do y'all think about that?
Well, I think that the whole overturning of Roe versus Wade was a step in the wrong direction. And I think that drove a lot of young voters, in particular from 18 to 44, to vote Democratic by 52%. And it probably pulled in some Republican voters as well, and some of these libertarian voters as well. I am not sure if in the media, libertarian is reflected as independent. That was going to be my next question, as far as is libertarian and independent, is that just basically synonymous? But getting back to your question, it sent a message that there had been too much overreach. There had been too much happening with controversy and disorganization in the government during the Trump years. And I think it sent the message that people are kind of tired of the shenanigans and the tit for tat back and forth. And, these are elderly men in Congress, and they're acting like children. They're screaming and they're yelling and they're banging on desks like children. And at the same time, this is supposed to be our representation. And I think that the message was sent that, no, you need to do a better job, as opposed to worrying about conspiracy theories, particularly in the case of those who lost, the election deniers that lost their races. I think folks are starting to finally get tired of the BS. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with Sean on that when it comes to Roe versus Wade. I think we have yet to see, if Trump is really running in 2024. I think how that turns out, I think it would solidify if people are over the belief of the last election being rigged and him being cheated, and I think we still need to see, but I do believe like Sean said, people came out because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and I'm not sure what we're going to see when it comes to the politics of everything. I really don't know. I think at the end of the day, there's just so much going on, I think, for people in this economy. I'm in the tech field, Sean, in the tech field. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of companies, big, major, multi-billion-dollar companies that are laying off massive amounts of people. And, there's a lot going on. I mean, interest rates are going up. People spent the last couple of years, within, over the pandemic, those years, people were buying homes at extreme prices. I mean, these prices were insane, the amount that people were spending on homes. And now all of a sudden, these 3-4% interest, if you did a ARM, this thing is ballooning, right? Like interest rates are like 7% now.
Yeah.
So there's so much going on, I think. And I think a lot of people, if the economy doesn't shape up, I think, under Biden, and people feel financially stable, I do think there will be definitely a sea change, I think, at the federal level, where people will vote for a Republican. or Democrats don't come out to vote, or, you know what I mean? Like, I think that will be the shift. Someone will have to, I mean, yeah, I think that will be the shift. I think people just move like that because a lot of times we believe that the president has, you know, a say in our pocketbooks.
Right.
So,
right. And it's not necessarily always the truth.
right. That's not necessarily how it always works, right?
That's
But
unfortunately how people think.
right, you know.
But I agree with both of you. I don't think I need to really add too much of that. I think I talked about that earlier. The fact that Roe versus Wade, that decision, and I think that kind of overwhelmed the economy. I think this, you know, the whole issue about the economy, because, you know, most time people, if the economy is bad and you have a president with a very, very low approval rate, and like Biden does, normally the opposite party, you know, makes plenty of gains. But this election really told me that anything really is possible when it comes to, if you get your people out and you vote.
Yes.
Right. And it also tells me too, if there's an issue that bothers people enough, you could literally change history. It really told me that. So it's not always, you can't look at history and think that it's going to always be this way. I think they really shot themselves in the foot. But one of the things that kind of disturbed me, well, I heard Gary Chambers, I think it was on social media. He was talking about the different counties in Louisiana that with all the eligible Black voters in that state, and the actual number that actually came out to vote was so minuscule. And we're looking at Georgia, looking at Florida, but places in the South like Louisiana, you know, it's just, you know, some of these southern states who have a very, very hard time with voting, with getting their people out to vote. During the right before the election, he mentioned that there were over 900,000 eligible Black voters in the state of Louisiana, but there was only a little over 9,000 people who actually got out and voted early. He said, so basically every 1 in 10 people that you see on the, only 1 out of 10 people that black that you see on the street actually voted. And so it went up maybe a little bit during the, you know, when the election, you know, during the actual election itself, on election day. But that really screams very, very loud when you have that, you have 900 people who are eligible, who are registered to vote, but yet you only have 10%, 15% or whatever that actually come out to actually vote. And you know, that is with, you know, now those percentages, you know, are true with all races. But I mean, well, I put it like this: there's always a situation where you have a lot less people who come out who actually register to vote in any race. But among the Black race, it tends to be, I don't know, it just tends to be something that we have a real problem with. It's getting us interested enough enough to vote. And a lot of us are thinking, I'm talking about black, because I listen to social media, and you have a mindset of a lot of Black people that voting does not matter. Both parties are the same, and you hear this rhetoric going on and on. And actual Black, and you even hear some commentators even encouraging Black people not to vote. I just think that's dangerous. You're talking about zero. You're talking about having maybe not much representation to having zero representation. It makes no sense to me at all. You know, I would rather have, if I'm out starving in the desert, I would rather have maybe a quarter glass of water rather than none. You know, I guess kind of the way I look at it.
Well, I would say this to that notion. First, let me state that, you know, at least in 2019, in Kentucky, the governor's race, this is just one sampling in that state. 40% of Americans with lower incomes remain a largely untapped political force. There's a quote that says the only way you can expand the electorate in the country, whether it's Democrat or Republican, is to expand among poor, low wealth people. That's poor white and poor Black. The Republicans have made headways because they've been able to do that in rural areas better than Democrats. But the Democrats have always had sort of like this built-in base with impoverished African Americans, and it's not like we don't have our own minds, or that we're monolithic, and that we can't look at both parties and see what they have to offer. Clearly, there is more to be offered from the Democratic side. You don't even have to be poor. You could be middle class. You could be rich, Black, or whatever. Clearly, there's more reasonable options on the Democratic side, at least in my opinion. Now, if you look at the overall voter turnout for the midterms, Black men voted 78% overwhelmingly Democrat. Black women voted 87% overwhelmingly Democrat. Latino men voted 51% Democrat. Latino women voted 61% Democrat. So if you look on the opposite side, you have white men who voted 61% Republican. White women voted 56 overwhelmingly Republican. So there's this race. It's more race than gender, but there is that divide, and it's usually that high, if not higher, for that demographic. Yeah. So they, I suspect a lot of these numbers raised higher when we had a president who communicated racist tropes for 4 years. And there's still that element in our politics, despite him not being in office. Racism divides politically, unfortunately. And when you start talking about low information voters, like we always talk about the tricks that are played in politics, and particularly on the far right side. They played those tricks very well. They sent out robocalls in Spanish appealing to Cuban voters, and that went under the radar. No one knows what was said in those robocalls, but they certainly helped DeSantis. In Dade County, it definitely helped DeSantis. And so these are the little things of how poor folks of any color are leveraged in politics with disinformation and misinformation. And like I said, it happens a lot on the conservative far right Republican side. And it's a shame you got to lie to win. I don't know if it's a good idea for Democrats to start lying outright to win, because if that's the case, then no one will. I'm sorry, I don't know if it really, I think some people are starting to realize that may not always be the best tactic, especially this last midterm. Definitely, I think, spreading misinformation definitely is effective. There's no question about that. It's definitely effective. But I think we saw a lot of this, like I said, this last midterm, where you saw a lot of people who just say, look, these people who are election deniers, who think that Biden didn't win, it's bull crap. And these are a lot of these people are Republicans who saw through that.
I do think that the Roe versus Wade definitely played a role. And I want to go back to something Sean was saying about messaging. When you read the amount of Black men who voted Democrat and the amount of Black women, you could see how the Black women, I mean, it's way higher, right? Right. It like kills, right? What, when it comes to the amount, the percentage for Black men. But, I also think about the messaging, right? And the one thing that conservatives do very well is that they stay on point with their messaging. They don't flip-flop on messaging. And so in some cases, I think yes, race does play a role because, of course, they want to, they split things. They focus a lot on crime, and when they show commercials, they show particular people in their commercials, right? But they have never switched their platform. They have always been steady. So when they talk about people coming after your guns, when they talk about like all these things they talk about, they have always talked about, and they don't switch their tactic, right? I think Republicans stay on point and on message, and they appeal to those individuals that they need to appeal to. Or what they do is build a narrative that helps bring in certain demographics of people, right? So things dealing around LGBTQ, when they talk about the bathroom situation, right? Remember that was a big thing. And hey, have any of you gone anywhere and seen like somebody, a man walk into a female bathroom?
Actually it's been years ago though. Actually,
I haven't seen anything like that, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, they made that such a huge thing, right? And they stayed on point, and they still talk about it to this day,
right?
Still use like the swimmer that the
fear tactic, scared to death, fear tactics,
the fear tactic. But the swimmer who won at the collegiate level, I can't remember her name, but the transgender swimmer, But they use all these things to, and they stick to it. They do not switch. So they know their demographic. They know they have a very high religious demographic. If you look at the Hispanic population, they're very religious people. So they definitely study their demographics, right? They definitely study their demo. So for Black men, they're studying their demo, right? For Hispanics, they're studying their demo. And they're understanding, all right, what makes these people tick? And within this group, what can I push to have them to change their minds, right? Or to set their minds on when they go into that booth, if they ain't gonna vote for us, they definitely ain't gonna vote for them, right? So like that's another thing too. That's another tactic. They may not know you may not get their vote, and you may not vote for them. But if you ain't getting up to vote because I made your candidate look so bad that you're just like, man, never mind, man. I ain't voting for no Reverend Warnock. He don't even come down here. He messing up my economy. Like some of the ads I saw, they was pushing with Reverend Warnock saying he helped spend all this money on golf trips and all. It was just like all this type of stuff. People watching that like, oh my God, he's spending all our money, our tax money on golf trips. I ain't voting for that man.
Right.
I'm gonna get up and go vote for this man. So like, that's the goal, right? So if I get less people getting up to vote for him, there's a potential that we can win.
Right. So, the truth doesn't matter. Like you just exactly.
And even if that's the game though, right? The Democrats need to know how to play the game. And
I still think, for me, I still think there's room for civility and honesty. I just think that I don't think that the Democrats should get down in the gutter with the Republicans, but I think they need to be more forceful with their narrative. They need much more forceful with the narrative. I don't necessarily think they should lie and intentionally do things like I clearly see Republicans are doing. Which is clearly what you see Marjorie Taylor Greene, just wacko. I saw the debates that she had, several weeks ago before the election. And it was just conspiracies and this and that. It's just pedophilia and, just kind of, but, to your point, Troy, the Republicans play to people's emotions.
Right. The people believe it. Right. So they already believe it. So to them, it's the truth.
Yeah. Right.
So, let me ask her, she's not telling them a lie. She's telling them the truth.
So fear is always, even doing Nixon with the war on crime, and then you have Ronald Reagan pushing the war on crime. That whole fear is a motivating factor to get people out the vote. And be honest, Republicans have been very, very successful at fear mongering and getting people out the vote. Now, I don't think Democrats should lie, and they intentionally lie, should try to lie in order to win over votes. But Democrats cannot continue to try to take votes for granted, and I think for a large part that's what they've done.
Yeah, but here's the thing too. I want to, as I think about it, is it a lie or is it using information differently? And hear me out here. So like crime has gone up, right? The Republicans are not going to explain to you why crime has gone up. They're not going to say, hey, we were in a pandemic and people were locked in their homes for 2 years. They're not going to say all that. Right. So in a way, crime has gotten bad. It has. It took a raise. It took a rise. Crime was going down. It took a rise. Now, it's still better than it was in the 90s, but they're not telling you all that. That's not their goal. What they're telling you is from last year to this year, crime went up, right? That's a fact, right? It's not a lie. It's a fact.
Yeah, I don't think that's a lie. I guess I'm more talking about specifically about Biden is not president. The election was rigged. Those types of things. They're just outright lies. And then the Democrats actually spending more money, which you've seen Trump has spent more money and drove the deficit more than any other president before him. So just those are blatant. But like you said, Troy, it's the way you also phrase certain things. And you use the crime for an example, and that's definitely don't go all the way back to just like the economy. The economy is bad, and I guess I don't look at that as a lie because the economy is bad. So
it's not a lie.
But how it got bad, that's the whole trick. And they don't go.
They're not going to tell you the full truth. They're just going to tell you like you got a Democratic president in office.
Right.
He did this massive spending bill.
Right.
The truth is, like, what did we really see in our?
And they say nothing about COVID at all. That didn't even come up in the conversation. Yeah.
Like I got one child, right? That child tax credit that everybody, like Warnock bragged about that. Like everybody got a check in the mail, right? But I got one child. So it's different for me, right? When I got one child compared to somebody who got 3 or 4 kids, right? That tax credit is probably huge, But he used the word thousands of dollars. I'm like, we didn't get thousands of dollars, But like.
We did.
Right? So it's like I got one child though, But like for people who did not get $1,000, they look at it like that. What are you talking about? $1,000? I didn't get $1,000. Who got $1,000? So you start to like wonder, like, is he really talking to me? Who got $1,000? You're trying to figure out who got $1,000, but no one's looking into that deep, right? Oh, I only got one child. This is why, right? No one's thinking like that. People just thinking for themselves, like about themselves and what they didn't get. So it's that whole type of thing of like the language, like even when he was debating Herschel Walker, and I think that debate Herschel Walker did not do bad at all, right? But Warnock had so many opportunities, not to lie, but to be more forceful,
right? You just
to be petty, to be petty, right? Like Herschel was petty. Herschel kept saying he knew what to say. You voted 96 times with Biden. 90s, like he kept doing that.
I actually thought Warner actually lost that, kind of either he was a tie or he lost it. I just didn't think that he was forceful enough. It just, to me,
right. He was just, and that seems to be the Democratic thing. My bad, Sean.
You guys are saying that Democrats should be forceful, but Demings was extremely forceful in her debate with Rubio. And let me tell you what happens, unfortunately, when African Americans are forceful, okay? It's unfortunate, but some white people see our passion and our forcefulness.
You're right.
Right.
You're right.
And so when she was dinging this guy, she ran circles around Rubio in that debate. But some people were looking at her, especially the ones who wasn't that familiar with her, and saying, oh, she's unhinged. Well, she's dangerous. And what happened? Rubio had been painting her as the dangerous. This is a former police captain.
Mm-hmm.
And he's running against her on crime.
Right.
Running against the former police captain on crime. This lady knows way more than this guy in Rubio does about how to solve crime, how to work with crime. Same thing with Warnock and Herschel. You are trying to court in the evangelicals against a former, was he a pastor?
Still a pastor, right?
He's still a pastor. This guy's been in church long before he thought about politics. He's been in church, leading a church. But you, the guy that, the dumb jock who's been caught lying, been caught outright lying about abortions.
Mm-hmm.
You're the angel, and that guy who's been over at church, that's the devil right there. No, I'm not the devil. So it's intentional misrepresentation, and it's deceit. They use deceit well. I'm not going to say that they communicate better. They are outright deceiving the voter base.
I think I think you're right. I think it's a couple of things. I do think they're better communicators, but at the same time, I also think that when we're talking about, I think the Democrat as a whole, the Democratic Party as a whole should be a little bit more forceful. But to your point, when Black people specifically try to be a little bit more aggressive, that's why I'm kind of glad you did say that, because that's why I thought about Stacey Abrams.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Stacey Abrams, and you could see it in her.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was very forceful when she was speaking. This was like a couple of weeks before. I mean, just very, very forceful. And for a lot of Black people, I even told my wife this a couple of weeks ago. I said, for a lot of white people, they look at that and they get scared. Mm-hmm. And we don't talk about that because that's something that's hard to put a nail on. It's hard to factualize. But when white people see certain Black people, especially being forceful, tactical like that, it literally scares them. And when you look at Stacey Abrams, you see a large Black sister, very intelligent, but could be perceived from a lot of white people as intimidating. And now I'm not no psychologist, but just you just look at history. That's just how a lot of white people see her. You see, and then she's a woman on top of that. Against a white man who's also an incumbent, but against a white man, that those things literally matter. I know a lot of people don't talk about that in the media. I think Black media, they do talk about that, but definitely in the media, those things we don't talk about those. But I think that is one of the things out of maybe many that hurt her. In this past election, and then like you said, and then is in Florida too. She was very, very. I mean, she was very forceful to me. Sean, it almost looked like she overcompensated. It was almost look, and I can tell she was purposely trying to be aggressive because she's a woman. But when I just sit there and listen to her, and it was almost like she was kind of overcompensating for that. I guess that's what I took away from her. I did see her debate. It was serious.
So to be honest, but at the same time, and I just want to add this point to the conversation, and I'll be silent, Troy. At the same time, we look at these Black men. We say Warnock wasn't aggressive enough. We look at the Black women. We say they came across, they was too strong, which that into itself is a societal problem. When you have Black women speaking up, somehow they appear too aggressive. But I digress. You have Black men. We had a Black man. We had Warnock who didn't want to come off too aggressive. Same issue Obama had. Right. Had Black women who seemed to come off way too aggressive for the good old boy network and the voters here in Florida. But at the same time, you had white men and white women talking all kinds of crazy stuff. We're going to take over this. We're going to shoot somebody in the head. They can talk all kinds of crazy, violent, sugar honey iced tea and get away with it. You can't come across strong by any sense of the imagination. Yep. That is the racial unevenness in politics. And I'll leave it at that.
Right. The unsaid too.
Right.
Exactly. We don't talk about that, but it definitely is effective, and there's a room, that there definitely is an issue. I'm sorry.
But I do no, I agree with you guys to an extent, right? Well, actually, I agree with you guys completely, but I do think there's nuance to that too, right? Because if these Black individuals were on a different party, it would not matter. To be honest with you guys, I think it wouldn't matter, right? So Herschel Walker has done some crazy stuff. He talks all types of nonsense, but he almost beat Warnock, right? Mm-hmm. He was very aggressive on that stage. right? But he's on a different side of the aisle.
Right. I agree.
That is all for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
While these other individuals on another side of the aisle, which is not all for it, they come off extremely educated, very brilliant, right? The idea of Democrats, they always say this, people who are Democratic and vote Democrat, they have 4-year college degrees. And, they always, like they talk about the demographic split so much of like who votes Democrat and who votes Republican, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things when we talk about like Georgia and Florida, for instance, right? One of the things with Stacey Abrams and even Demings that they're in Florida, we also got to look at demographics, right? Like demo plays a major role in that. That's why I was telling you guys where Stacey Abrams won, because at the end of the day, right? If that candidate does not speak to the ideals you have, you're not getting them, right? Like they're not voting for her, right? It's the people who believe what she is saying or believe what they feel she will change, right? So I always say to people, when Obama was running, right, there was a lot of hope from all types of people, right, about Obama. They didn't really know too much about that man. But what they did know is that his mama was white, his daddy was African. He's different, right? Mm-hmm. And you remember there was one group of people that was definitely putting a lot of vote behind Obama. It was the LGBTQ community, right? There was a lot of people in that community. They were out and they had their signs painted. They were out and getting out people to vote for him because they had promised that when this man becomes president, even though at the time he was not for gay marriage, right, in their mindset, they had a hope, right? Because he ran on this idea of hope that he would be someone to change things, right? Democrats are known for that, right? They're pushing this idea of hope and change and changing for the better in all people. So they put their hope behind them, right? I think Democrats almost need to do that for those other people on the other side, right? So like when Democrats talk about guns and gun control, it does come off like they're taking away all the guns. Instead of being honest, like, nah, we're not trying to take away. Like no one ever said like gets that deep with it, right? But the Republicans would tell you they're gonna take all your guns away.
Right.
There's a lot of people in rural America that have their own guns, right? And they believe that. Like when they get in office, they're gonna make me do this type of check and that type of check and this type of check, and it'll make me take all day just to go get a gun when it's, I already do things right now to get my gun. Like I already have to go through checks to get my gun. Like what else are you going to make me go? So like there's a lot of these things that Democrats need to talk to get those type of voters. But a lot of times they don't pay attention to those voters. And I think that's the issue, right? Like I said, Kemp went to the black church, right? Yeah. And he made sure he was visible, even if he knew that they may not vote for him. He's going to say things that may sit in the back of your head. I bet Kemp, when he was talking to the black church, he talked about abortion. And he talked about the idea of how many black babies have died. And, all that type of stuff that they always do, right? And in the back of somebody's head. Yeah, because all you got to do is advertising works.
Yeah, all you got to do is cipher off a few of them. You don't got to.
Exactly. Sean, you know how advertising works, how we used to do it, right? It's not about you getting to do it now. It's the subliminal.
But you're like.
Live in your head. We wanted to live in your head. You don't need to act right now. We just hoping that when you pass down the street and you see that billboard, it makes you think, so that's the goal, right? So the goal is to, have it seep into their heads and have it stay there, and when something else happens, it triggers, right? And that's the goal, right? So I think a lot of times that's what I'm saying, if Stacey Abrams can keep changing the demographic, if Atlanta keeps booming, and it keeps having this diversity in the movie, like Fayette County has changed where I live at. Like locally, Republicans are having a hard time. This is a Republican county, and they are having a hard time keeping seats here because it's becoming extremely diverse, not just racially.
But the further she gets out of these metropolitan areas, the worse she does. To your point,
yeah.
Literally, because she's going out to the rural areas, and this is just to be honest, a lot of these rural areas, and then even statistics, play this out. People who tend to live in the cities, larger cities, have a more diverse thinking process. Mm-hmm. And so, but when you get out to these rural areas, they tend to be kind of stuck in their ways, kind of you know, apolitical. And so, you know, I just think it's very difficult for someone like Stacey Abrams to really get a foothold, even if she started talking, you know, about you know, different issues that maybe are specific to them, you know, like farmer issues or whatever, and or jobs or whatever it might be. I think the racial makeup of a lot of those places are just such that it's going to be very difficult for a black to make us. And then when you look at those areas, you saw where she did not do well. A lot of those outlying areas, did pretty good in Savannah, those places where you have a lot of African American people. Cobb County is one of those places that used to be mostly white. Now it's different. You know, of course, Fulton County, but when you get out to these suburbs, these areas here that are majority white, she just doesn't get that vote, and it reminds me of how Margie Taylor Greene kind of ran away with her whole you know, she's up in North Georgia, in those areas, and those areas are known to be predominantly white and not too favorable amongst black people. Just be honest, you know, I'm just be frank with those, a lot of people, and historically, and if you go up there, and I'm familiar with those areas because we camped out in those areas. There's a lot of Confederate flags, a lot of KKK people who live up there, and so that's Republican stronghold territory. And so, you know, a person like Stacey Abrams just ain't gonna do good up there, period. I don't care what she does.
That good old boy network.
And that goes nationwide when it comes to voting, getting a black governor in office. I think Maryland has the first black governor in Maryland, which makes only the third or fourth black governor in the United States, period. Which is, you know, it's kind of hard to think, but that's the situation. It's amazing how, and even the Senate race here in Georgia, you know, it's just unbelievable how difficult it is to get a majority vote, you know, to get reelected as a black, you know, person, specifically Democrat, in a place like Georgia, especially with the governor's race and those, even the senatorial races.
You gotta realize that the demo in Maryland is very different than the demo in here in Georgia, right? So again, demographics play a role.
Right.
Because I'm from the DMV area, I'm from there, and it's you know, different. I mean, Atlanta is not that far off, but again, you got to think about it. If you look at Stacey Abrams and where she won in those metropolitan areas.
That's my point, though. Like I said, the demographics definitely are different. You know, when you look from Georgia, which is still a Republican, semi-Republican stronghold, it's not completely Democrat. It hasn't really changed. It's kind of like purple, like they say, you know, right now. But you know, I just think it's kind of sobering. But the fact that the Maryland governor, who was a sharp guy, I mean, very intelligent, I mean, won handily up there in Maryland, and I think he's going to be a great governor. But he's one of only 3 or 4. And then when you look at state legislatures who are able to redraw these districts, this is another reason why Republicans were able to take their House of Representatives. They redrew a lot of districts, which gave them the advantage. And so a lot of these, even in Alabama right now, they're chopping up, you know, the black belt and chopping up a lot of predominantly all black districts, and in order to win these electorates. And black folks are almost helpless because they are, you know, very few blacks are Democrats in the legislature. Republicans from nationwide control legislatures, the state legislatures. That's just how it has been that way for, I don't know, almost eternity. Democrats have got to figure out a way to get in those offices, because it may seem very insignificant, but those are big deal. Those legislatures, it's a big deal because they're able to either uphold or write many laws and legislation that affect us directly, even when it comes to voting.
And to be fair to Republicans, whenever the ruling power obtains that power, whether it's Democrat or Republicans in each state, both parties will seek to redistrict and we draw
That's
lines.
true. That's true.
And because I don't want us to represent that as just Republicans doing it, but what I say that to say this: the whole redrawing of lines for the entire purpose of power, that needs to end because both sides do it and it's
Right.
unfair to the population within those lines.
Right. Right.
They only do it to seek power. They don't do it to properly represent
Right. Right.
in those lines.
I get the issue I was making earlier is that, and you're right, the both sides do it, and both have historically been doing it. The Republicans seem to be doing it. It's the reasoning behind it, what it seems, even like in Alabama. Democrats may do it for political reasons, which still doesn't make it right.
Right.
And they look and find whether the predominantly Republican strongholds are, but the Republicans seem to do it more along racial guidelines, and that's the issue that I guess I have. Either way, I think it should be completely done away with. I think that's one of the biggest problems that when somebody gets in the office, all of a sudden you have a restructuring of the districts just in order to get your person to win. That completely it completely just bastardized the whole system to me. It really is your point.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we coming up on a substantial amount of time for this show. We can end it off, I guess, by me asking, where do you think we go from here? And a short explanation or synopsis from both you guys.
I'll go first. I think when it comes to strategy, I think the Democrats need to think long term, and extremely long term, and on a micro level as well. So I do think the Democrats focus a lot on these ideas of these midterms and then the major general elections, and they need to focus on the cities, the counties, the cities, the states. They need to focus on those type of elections.
Yeah.
It's very important. I think they need to do more actual advertising or door-to-door or speaking engagements to have demographics understand the importance. I don't know if it was you or Lester who talked about the massive demo of individuals who did not vote. It was like 900 something thousand or something like that. It was a lot, or 9,000 or something.
900,000.
Not 900,000.
Eligible
voters, Black voters who didn't vote, right? And I've seen that too. A lot of people are like, why vote, right? Because I don't think the Democrats are doing a good enough job educating people on the importance and what voting does, especially at a local level. So like your sheriff, your state attorneys, like all these things, like they're not doing that job. Your judges, they're not doing their job at educating people on the importance of voting. And then until afterwards, right? So then, it defeats the purpose. So I think they need to do a better job at educating people if they want that 900,000 to come out and actually vote, right? I always tell people when I've had some friends say that, on their timeline, they ain't going to vote, and they've been very open about it. And I've always replied to it. People actually died to vote, and I'm not saying that to make you get up and go vote. I'm saying that because I want you to understand how important your vote was, that they killed Black people when they went to vote, right? Like, it's important. You have to understand, if someone's going to kill you for doing something, then it must mean something, So like, you got to understand how important that is, that they were so fearful of your vote that they murdered you. They blew up buses of people being transported to vote. This is real. It's not, so it's a real thing. Your vote could change your situation, so, and I don't think Democrats do a very good job at that. And they may need to imply a bit of fear tactic, right? Because back in the day, they implied fear tactics because Black people know they could possibly get killed going on those buses to go vote. They knew that, right? But they understood that if I can get certain things my way, my life and my children's life and my children's life could be better, right? So I think a bit of fear sometimes work. And I think the Democrats may want to take a page from the Republican book.
Where do we go from here? That's almost a subject in itself, a topic in itself. But I think as a whole, whether you're Democrat or, well, for the Democrats, I think that I don't think anything needs to change as far as I think you need to be more forceful. I think when it comes to talking about the benefits of becoming a Democrat or being a Democrat, and also putting the Republicans on the red carpet too as well, when it comes to things that they're not doing. But I think the issue, and I keep going back to the same issue I think we talked about some time ago. I think when me and Sean was doing it, the issue of trying to appeal more to people to vote, whether it be Blacks to vote. I think that's where the strategy comes in, especially for Democrats, because the way we're looking at it, the way things are going now, especially with the Republicans, they have decided that they're going to lie. They're going to cheat. They're going to do whatever they got to do to win. Mm-hmm. They've made that decision, period. And unless the Democrats are going to be smart to try to counteract that, we're going to lose coming up. We're going to lose big time. We may have got a reprieve just this last time during the midterms, but I think the Republicans have definitely decided that they're going to lie, and they're going to push it all the way to 10. Rather than having some type of middle ground when it comes to the truth, they're going to push it to 10 every time to get their fear. And I think that, I think like Troy, a little fear is not going to hurt. I think sometimes you have to instill, in order to get people to pay attention, you have to instill some form of fear in them to get them to go out and vote and take that issue seriously. So I think moving forward, I think we've got to continue to be honest to our people, expose the Republicans for who they are more, and don't necessarily lie, but I think we got to be more tactful when it comes to winning over the voters. And I think we still have to do the thing that has always been our best tool, is to get people out to vote. We got to get people out to vote. And Republicans have seen it now that the more Blacks get out and vote, the more Hispanics, the more people of color get out and vote, it hurts them. And they've seen that. So that's why in the past general election, they saw that in 2020, they saw that when Black people get out and vote, that they will lose elections almost every time. Unless they do something, unless they change the rules. And so like, that's why I talked about these state legislatures. Their tactic is they're going to change the rules. So we got to be smart. Okay, if they're going to change the rules, that means we got to be ahead of them. We got to be twice as smart. So that's what I think that we need to do moving forward.
Awesome. And just to piggyback off of that, I have this point to make. One thing poor unengaged voters and rich unengaged voters have in common, they tend not to vote, believe it or not, for different reasons and in high numbers. There are actually rich to-do voters. Some of them, they just don't vote because they're somehow out of the realm of the effects of local and federal politics to a certain degree. But they don't vote, just like poor unengaged people tend not to vote. The difference is that the rich know their power even when they don't vote, because they vote with their money. The poor can't vote. They don't have that option of voting with their money because they're poor. So they must learn to leverage their power with their vote itself and come out and get educated on what's happening, like Troy said, locally and on a federal level, and represent. Else it's continual taxation without representation. And on that note, we're gonna come out of this show. Thanks for having us in your ear, and we'll be back again soon.
Peace, guys.